in my writing, I basically talked about the most complex thing first on some level, trying to make it as simple as possible, and then moved it to simple to try to connect it to people in their lives. So it was actually an opposite kind of flip on that level. And that kind of flip, that kind of change from talking to listening, from this idea of being fond of caveats to really searching for what was going on, what was important, what was going to be important to people. This idea of who's the audience and who am I trying to talk to. This idea of moving not from complex ideas or simple ideas to complex ideas in my science, but from complex ideas to simple ideas, really did start to affect how I thought about science journalism and what we should be doing. And basically what I've kind of, and I'll stop soon there, is that when I basically then was out, I was working for the Scientist magazine, I worked for the Tyee in Vancouver, a few other places. I was writing as much as I could. I wasn't always doing science journalism, but sometimes science communication. Because I had a science background, people were also asking me to do all sorts of things about basically translating science, and we can get back to whether or not that is enough. My big beef, theoretically, as a researcher, as a journalist, is the idea that what journalists and what we should be doing is taking science and translating it for the public. I don't think that is at all the function of a science journalist. I think that that's actually one piece of the puzzle and one important puzzle and one historical puzzle that we've been pushed before, but I actually think that that's, in this day and age especially, too little too late to think that that might be something that we really should be doing. Instead, what I'm thinking about in the classroom and the thinking of the Concordia Science Journalism is really about how do you get students? Because I went through science, I went through journalism, I did a journalism degree ultimately when I came back. How do you get students that either have no interest in science or have a big interest in science to write about these topics in a way that they're comfortable about it, that they can talk about it, that it's for a certain purpose, in a way that actually gets us somewhere? So number one is we have to ask what that purpose is. And I think we might have some clarity on what we think it is, and I think there might be a different response for each person here, but until we decide what we really think the function is, the purpose is, it's hard to decide everything else, and you're just going to end up with the recalcitrant debates, basically the debates you probably talked about a lot in this course. Some of those have been around. You can go back 100 years and find virtually all of them talked about in virtually the same way. Why do they keep existing? Why is it so hard to get rid of them? Or will we never get rid of them in some ways? Some of these things, we keep talking about them, we keep talking them. For me, it comes down to this fact of what do we really think we should be doing as science journalists? What do we really think science journalism should be doing for people? Who are we trying to reach with it? And what are the different forms and how do the different forms relate to that? So in this basically Concordia Science Journalism program when I got there, I really thought about Canadian science journalism, what's there, and how we might support it, and how we might think through it. I think there's lovely, wonderful science journalism going on in Canada. I think there's a lot of it. I also think there's always room for improvement in thinking about how actual certain topics are reported, written about, broadcast, and those kind of ideas, especially when we come to the idea of how people interact with science, how much of ability they have to actually get a hold of it, to put their claws in it, to learn something about it and affect it, instead of just being this passive audience that needs to learn science for some reason. But how do they actually engage with it? How do they actually bring people forward into it? So we have a world that we're not just, oh my God, I can't believe they discovered that. Why did they do that in the first place? But there's more of a back and forth, a two-way discussion between people that know nothing about science, the non-experts, and people that spend their whole life studying it, the experts, as you might say, and what they're trying to do. So that kind of back and forth. And then on the other side, how do you actually go about doing that? What kind of skills do you need? How do you get through that? How do you get people to see where the potholes are, the things you might fall back and forth, especially in a changing world where basically online media, everything else like that, some things doors have been opened that will never be closed and things may or may not change, but there's at least interesting discussions to have. So at Concordia, we have basically, I'll stop in one moment, two courses that I'll tell you about. One is basically a science reporting course. And really what that reporting course pushes people through is really to get them involved in how do you actually report about a topic. They actually cover 3 beats. 2 beats I actually select basically to say that these 2 beats are something that I think you guys should cover this year. It's important right now. You can do it and compete against journalists that are out there writing about it. And 1 beat they have to come up with themselves to kind of talk about.